Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mondays with Maishi. Again, I'm proud to say that this is we're well into our third year of Mondays with Maishi. Who'd ever have thought that it would last this long, and who'd ever have thought that it would grow this large, and that so many people would be benefiting from this program. It's really an honor for me to be able to provide it. What started off as a not really much of a vision, but just a small idea and a small kind of debate about psychotherapy has morphed into something very meaningful, and I hope helpful to the masses. And if not, at least it's been to my benefit that I've been able to learn from so many experts and great people in the psychotherapy world. So it's really an honor every time I have somebody who is willing and agreeable and generous enough to give of their time to take this hour and a quarter, hour and a half. Sometimes it extends even longer, just to provide information, a new perspective on psychotherapy process. It's really wonderful for me and for the mental health community. And so I thank you. I thank you. Shifi Lieberman, who's our guest tonight, is a licensed marriage family therapist, right? Is that how you say it?
Yep.
Here in New Jersey, and has actually dedicated much of her time working with children in and out of school settings, working with parents of children in and out of the school settings, and then eventually going on to develop a beautiful curriculum, which I hope we get to hear about tonight and you share, and we'll check out your website and your resources. And I imagine that, like most of us, as time goes on and you develop more experience and see more children, your curriculum changes and grows. So thank you, Shifi Lieberman, for joining us tonight from Passaic, New Jersey, or thereabouts.
Sort of, kind of. Maishi, I actually really thought that you were going to thank me for coming up with this idea, Mondays with Maishi, because a few years back, when I was trying to encourage you to make your own virtual course, I actually thought that maybe that's what sparked your excitement about this Zoom call. So I was kind of taking credit for that, but I
Yes,
guess
well, the credit's yours then.
okay, great. We
So
can.
for those of you who could turn on your videos, we always love to see people's faces. I know Yaakov is off video now, but will probably be on video any minute as he obliges most weeks, unless, thank you, Yaakov. 3 cheers for Yaakov. Let's give him a thumbs up. How do we do that? We're going to use the reactions tab on the bottom of our screen to give Yaakov a thumbs up. Why am I mentioning that? Because it's really important. For those of you who have questions or comments, you're going to go down to the bottom right of your screen where it says reactions. You're going to click on that. You're going to raise your hand, and Shifi will answer take your questions, answer them, take your thoughts, and if you have something really valuable that you add, she will add it to her curriculum, and you'll be helping so many thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of children when Shifi writes her book one day. Okay, so now here I planted that seed.
Okay.
Okay, so when the book comes out, I'll take the credit.
Yeah.
You get the cash, I'll take the credit. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so Shifi, tell us just who you are. Tonight's topic, of course, is the topic of the process of social skills and emotional management. And
We practice that.
yes, and usually it ends within psychotherapy, but today we are inviting whoever is involved with children, which pretty much includes just about everybody, to join tonight's segment and to learn about social skills and emotional management. I'm actually really excited about learning about both topics, both for my clientele, which has a minimum amount of children, but definitely is full of parents, and for my personal life, whether it's for my own social skills that could probably use some improvement, or for the social skills that parents could really benefit from in helping their children. So Shifi, tell us who you are. How did you get into this field? And certainly as an LMFT, the last thing I would think is that you're going to be focused on children, social skills, and emotional management. So tell us how you got here.
Sure, that's a great question. So I started my career, I would say, straight out of seminary. I always knew that I wanted to be in the field of psychology, and I got my BA actually in Towson University. And right after that, shortly after that, I was looking for different programs, and I already had 1 or 2 kids, and I could not find a program that I liked, and I ended up deciding I was going to go to University of Maryland School of Social Work, which I did for a year. and I liked it until I realized like halfway through that this is like really not, it's just not talking to me. It was just the schooling was different. It was very focused on politics. And it was just, like people said, because maybe it was closer to Washington. So it was taking that approach. So when afterwards we moved to New York and I was applying to different schools, I actually applied to school psych in Brooklyn College. I applied to Fordham for educational psych until one day, I'll never forget, someone came over to me and she's like, "Shifi, why don't you go for family therapy?" I'm like, "What the heck is family therapy?" I'm like, "There's a degree called family therapy." I'm like, "Yeah, duh, this is what I want." So I found the degree finally in Seton Hall, which was one of the reasons actually that my husband and I decided to go to Passaic, including that he was in law school in New York. And I applied to Seton Hall and I started all my credits from scratch. And since then, I've been the biggest fan of family therapy. If any of you have children, or you yourself are looking to explore the different fields, please call me about the family therapy degree. I'm so excited about it and passionate about it.
So you feel that going for for family therapy degree was beneficial, way beneficial, and worth its while.
I thought so. I found that the schooling was different. Like they actually taught us, like a family comes into the room. What do you look for? Who do you speak to first? Who makes the phone call? What's the dysfunction? We went through 13 different theories of dysfunction, like the main theories of dysfunction of why families are just why do some families function and other families just can't function. It was, and especially since I feel like in our community where family plays such an important role and we're so influenced by our family, no matter if we like it or if we don't, but it's just the reality. I feel like I always said, like, when we're talking about, let's say, being an alcoholic in the school of social work, like they were very much focused on the individual, on on where they lived, on what they did, how to get, just how to set them up, individually for success. But in the marriage and family therapy program, like we really, really focused on how did we get here? How did the problem happen? What's the, and much more solution focused and goal oriented. And it really included the family in the treatment, which again, in our culture, I just felt like that was so important.
Amazing. So, and it really is, really is. Now I'm just curious that when you went to Seton Hall and studied family therapy, did they place an emphasis, let's say, on a particular modality of family therapy? Do they teach about Haley's family therapy or Minuchin
Absolutely.
structural family therapy? Do they try to include everything? Is there a specific focus that they have?
Yes, they absolutely did. We went through Minuchin. We learned the genogram, we learned problem solving therapy and solution to Shazer's solution focused therapy and Sue Johnson's emotion focused therapy. And we learned all of the different many, like that's really what the classes were made up of. And I really was exposed to so many different types of therapy. And in my thesis paper that I had to present was really like, what is Shifi's modality? Like, how do I see families? I have to take the information that was given to me over the last like 4 or 5 years and like crunch it and just come up with how I see families. And I do actually have my theory, like the 2 most important ingredients that help families function. And I came up with that. And I don't know, I graduated in 2008. And I don't know, I still feel so strongly about those 2 key ingredients.
Well, by golly, let's hear what they are. I mean, tell us about what you see as family dysfunction, family therapy. What are some of the etiologies and the sources of what's going on? And I would add that, I mean, you could probably talk about this for the whole hour, but I would add to the question,
yeah.
what would you say are some primary reasons when I think of children or adults who struggle socially or with social skills? I could think of so many different angles that this would be coming from, anywhere from attachment to developmental challenges, and everything in between. So tell us a little bit about how you perceive this, or what your conceptualization is, and then maybe somehow my question will be somewhat answered. Go ahead.
So let me just take a few steps back and let me tell you how I got into social skills and emotion management. And then I'll tell you the 2 secret ingredients I see some of my course members on here, so I think that they know it.
And just
But
let me know if I have to turn off the recording when the secrets come out.
I charge extra for that. I will tell you the two secret ingredients, but let me tell you like my experience and how my experience brought me to where I am. So I was in Seton Hall, I was living in Passaic, and I applied to Jewish Family Services of Passaic Clifton. Now, when I applied for my internship, I was actually still living in Brooklyn at the time, which the head of the director of the agency told me afterwards there was no way they would ever have given me there was no way that they would have given me the job knowing that I lived in Passaic Clifton. But as luck would have it, I spent probably the next, I think it was 9 years there, including my internship, and I stayed there afterwards. So part of what I did was they were giving me children, they were giving me families, and part of my responsibility was to teach social skills, develop a social skills curriculum in a local school, Yeshiva Katana Passaic, and teach it to the children there. And that is where I got so much of my training. I, at that point, had to research so many different types of social skills programs. I was researching it, like the firm ones, the not firm ones. And I ended up going with the program called Second Step, which is the program that is used to teach social skills in the public schools. And originally what I was doing, I was preparing the lessons every single week, and I was teaching it to the teachers to give it over to the students. I was preparing it. I was really animated. I was very excited about it. And, once a week I'd meet the teachers, the Hebrew teachers, the English teachers, and I expected them to give over the curriculum in class.
Well, and so just say, what's the name of it again? Is it Social Steps?
Second Step.
Second Step?
Second Step.
And who is the producer of it?
I'm not sure. It's a research-based program, which they use in a lot of the public schools still today. So a lot of my research and a lot of my understanding of social skills is really coming from Second Step. I actually redid it for the firm community, which is kind of the curriculum which is my passion and which is what I sell. But I give them tons of appreciation and gratitude and acknowledgement that so much of what I learned really came from them. So I was teaching the teachers, and it was the biggest bust ever, because the teachers who already knew the social skills or knew the understanding behind how children develop the social skills were loving it. And but they didn't need me because they were naturally doing that. And what was that? Okay. And the ones who just were not intuitive or didn't have the social skills themselves were fighting me on it. They're like, Shifi, we're not hired to teach social skills. We're hired to teach science and math. We have a curriculum. We have tests at the end of the year. And they were like complaining to me, like, I remember like I used to walk down the hallway and they'd be like, so scared to see me because they hadn't taught the lesson of the week. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not fighting these teachers on it. It was not very successful. So what we did at that point was we hired students to go into the classes and teach the kids themselves. And at that point I had a real aha moment and a real like awakening. And I was like, the children who are suffering in the schools the most, and I was in the school by day and I was in the Jewish Family Service by night. I was like, the ones who are suffering the most, I'm seeing their parents come into Jewish Family Service at night and their families come into Jewish Family Service at night. And here I'm trying to teach the children social skills and emotion management. And I'm watching the parents come back and forth for therapy, with one child, with two child, with their marriage. And, I was getting like a real glimpse. And I'm thinking to myself, like, teaching and helping these children without helping the parents is not going to work. So at that point, we went through a lot of different things. Should we do parent meetings? Should we try to, how do we teach the parents to help their own children? At that point, I had decided just a few years ago that I'm going to put my information into a virtual course and I'm going to sell it to the parents. And this way I can empower the parents to help their own children. And we'll go through this curriculum that I developed for the students, for the teachers, for the students, and I'm going to give it to them directly so that they have it really on a silver platter. And that has been my belief. And so far it's been extremely successful. I find that these children, so many of these children were being referred to therapy, and sometimes by me, they were being referred to therapy by me and from the school, but honestly, they didn't need therapy. Their parents needed an understanding and an awareness of really the secrets to success of raising a healthy family. And that this has been my passion over the last many years.
You make an interesting point about the children having poor social skills because of some of their parents' challenges or limitations. And I guess what I have to wonder is, can you actually teach parents social skills? And if you can, why can't you teach it to the children as well? Parents who are limited, just like you talked about the teachers who are limited and didn't have social skills, so it was difficult for them to convey that information. How does it help to have parents reading a social skill literature, or even teaching them? I mean, maybe teaching them if it's more experiential, I can understand, but how does that work?
Okay, it doesn't. It doesn't. The only way for children to learn social skills is by having the parents model it for them. It's not good. They can read tons of books. They can
Mhm.
read tons of literature.
So,
They
so
can
how, so again, so how do you explain, selling your course or showing, giving your course to the parents as being effective? You obviously saw success in that.
correct. So I always say there's the number one most effective way to teach social skills and emotion management and emotion regulation, as you like to call it, is really by training the parents. And this is really what I've been focused on, based on attachment theory. And for those of you who would like to take notes, can write down this line. But based on attachment theory, for those of you who are not familiar with attachment theory, the relationship that a child has with their primary attachment caregiver is going to influence the relationship that they have with their peers, with their spouse, and eventually with their own children. So if we don't perfect to the extent that we can perfect the relationship that we have with our children and with, and children with parents, then that is going to influence the relationship with their peers. So when there's insecurities, or there's anger management issues, or there's jealousy, or there's withdrawn, or there's bully behavior between peers that are at this point in 5th and 6th grade, what we have learned through the research is that this came very often from, is a mirror of the relationship that they had with their own parents. And when parents could understand that, all of a sudden they're like, teach me. Like a lot of times parents will call me like, you don't understand, my child has no friends. And I'll say, like, how's your relationship with your child? And for years I was getting, I'm not talking about my relationship with my child. I'm talking about my child's relationship with their friends. Like, they're just not getting along. And when all of a sudden they connect the dots and they realize that they have such influence over their child's future relationships by developing their relationship with their child, all of a sudden it's worth investing.
Mhm.
And the problem is that they didn't know how.
So how is this something that you teach? Is it teaching, or is it modeling, or is it experiential?
So it's a great question, and it's really all three. It's really all three. So what was happening for years was that I was a family therapist, and I spoke to Relief multiple times a week, and they were sending me the children to help the children. And I'll never forget the day. I remember the kid who said it to me, but they walked in and they're like, "Shifi, thank God it's Monday. Thank God it's Monday." And I was like, why thank God it's Monday? And they're like, "You don't understand. Something happened to me last Wednesday. I've been holding it in since Wednesday. Like, I can't wait to talk to you about it." And I said, "You've been holding it in since Wednesday. You have a mother, like you have a father. Why couldn't you speak to them?" And they were like, "No, they totally wouldn't understand. Like, they would never say the right thing. They would blame me. They would shame me. Like, they would just make it sound like my parents would never understand." And at that point, I realized that what I was doing by seeing children in therapy was very often causing distance and causing the child to trust the parents less and not more. And I felt like very strongly that that's not.
So you don't want to be the sole attachment object. You wanted the parents to be the attachment object.
Correct. So I needed to teach the parents. In many instances, parents cannot. They're just not capable from the trauma that they went through or from whatever they went through. And in those instances, I actually do agree with the school of thought to send children to therapy. But the first treatment is really, let's try to change. Let's try to train the parents and give them the information that they need to help their own children.
I see. So this is your go-to initial step would be to teach the parents and have them get on board with attaching better with their child.
Correct.
Okay. So what we need to look at is as follows. I got to take a few notes down here before I ask.
I just want to say that I don't think that this is only for children that have social skills deficits or that are not functioning in school. My own children and my own relationship with my children have have benefited tremendously from this information because I'm in my 40s. I don't know how many of you, how old, the crowd is, but we were not brought up with this information either. I'm saying Dan Siegel and, led the way in terms of, understanding our brain and understanding empathy and understanding all of our different emotions. And as much as I grew up, and I could even ask you, Maishi, like how many emotions come, you're a therapist, so, and most of us are, but how many emotions come to our tongue by the tip of our tongue? I dare you all after this phone call to, to look to your right or find some some person that you want to pick on and ask them how many emotions they can come up with. Most adults, it was unbelievable to me, came up with happy, if they call that an emotion, happy.
That's not happy's not, that's not in my repertoire.
Okay, happy,
I have some others.
And angry. Like that's like, and they were like angry, upset. Like, we don't naturally say, I was brought up with the most healthy, nurturing parents, but I never grew up saying, I'm feeling disappointed. Like I was very hurt today by something that happened in school. I'm very frustrated. These are not things that we said growing up. So even healthy functioning children, the research has changed and has really developed, and they still need to be able to learn these words in order to communicate an emotion rather than acting out the emotion.
Right.
So,
Shifi, I find myself struggling with something that's so basic with clients that they have a hard time doing. I've broken down validation when I give classes or workshops or trainings. I teach people that I've broken down validation to be 2 simple words with a third enhancer if you want to enhance. Okay, it's 2 words, the whole validation. When your significant other is talking to you or complaining to you or telling you about something exciting, right, is emoting, you look at them and you say, that's frustrating, that's annoying, that's exciting. And if you want to enhance it, you could say, that's so frustrating, that's really annoying, that's very upsetting, right? It's 2 simple words, maybe with some affect, with some expression, right? I find that people simply can't, I don't want to say for whom, but I recently gave a parenting workshop for people who are having struggling teenagers. And I taught them these 2 words. And it was a 6-class workshop. And I came back to, I taught it in class, let's say 2. I came back to them at class 4 or 5, and I said, I want to do a little quiz. Who can tell me what are 2 words? What are the 2 words to validate somebody who's complaining to you or sharing with you? I think many of them couldn't answer it. There's something, that seems to be more than just didactic teaching or even experiential that gets people stuck in being able to do some of the most basic attachment skills, whether it's between, husband and wife, parent and child, etc. That people just have a blockage. Am I missing something here?
No, I agree with you completely. Part of what we do, and this is we start off in my virtual course called Social Skills Made Simple. We start off with the most basic understanding of just emotions, because if I asked you, and I'm not going to put you on the spot now because you might just not have the lingo off the top of your tongue, but if I asked you to explain the difference between frustration and disappointment, many people cannot. They understand that something is frustrating and they understand that something is disappointing, but they can't put it into words. So part of what I really honestly do is we explain the concept of empathy, which is exactly what you just explained, but I take it one step further and I say that you can't have empathy for somebody else unless you have empathy for yourself first, because you can't understand the feeling of frustration that they're feeling unless you can work and understand that and identify the frustration that's within you first. How do you explain what chocolate ice cream tastes like if you've never tasted chocolate ice cream? So you really, honestly, the first thing that we need to do is we need to understand that it is not possible for you to have empathy for somebody else, including your spouse, including your child, unless you have empathy for yourself first. And this is an extremely eye-opening process for so many adults, because many adults, times were different. They didn't get the empathy that we need today and that our children need today. A lot of us suppressed, a lot of our emotions, or we just bottled them all up into anger, or we just acted out the emotions, or we withdrew from the interactions. But so many of us we're not able to articulate and communicate and identify the emotions within us. So the first thing that I do, which I think is extremely powerful, is I explain all, like I go through probably 10 or 12 of the most primary basic emotions, and I put them into words. A, it's helpful for adults to understand, but B, this way we're able to articulate it and communicate it to our child. Disappointment, there's an expectation. I was expecting A and I got B. I was expecting my Hanukkah present to come on Thursday, and it arrived on Friday. That's extremely disappointing. I was expecting something. I was expecting my mother to be there, and she wasn't home when I came home from school. That's there. With disappointment, there's a whole element of expectation. With frustration, it's somebody is blocking you from getting a desired goal. That is extremely frustrating. We talk about the two primary emotions that we are born with are sadness and fear. Those are the two primary emotions that we're born with. And as we go through life, we develop more and more and more emotions. Like a 3-year-old doesn't feel shame. A 3-year-old runs around naked, doesn't feel shame. At some point, you see, I love it, like that age when like all of a sudden they stop running around and you're like, shame kicked in or embarrassment kicked in.
But I see it when the child starts to hide when he makes a dirty diaper.
Right, it's exactly right. See, exactly. I guess I've driven nursery carpools and they'll be like, who wants to come to my house? No, not you. Yes, you. I'm like, the kids are like, okay, I'll go to someone else's house. And I'm thinking to myself, like, fast forward 6 years, if the children are having the same interactions, the hurt that has developed over time is major. And what happens is that if this is not taught to our children, if the language is not taught to our children, they revert to mad, sad, and fearful and afraid. And these are the only emotions that they know. People have to understand that emotions develop over time, and what emotions develop over time. Guilt is a more sophisticated emotion. Shame is a more sophisticated emotion. They don't have that.
So I want to just pause for a second.
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing you say is, because you talked about a almost cognitive difference between, like an explainable difference or cognitive difference between disappointment and frustration. And your explanation doesn't talk to the emotional experience of it. It only talks to when they occur, what circumstances make each one occur, right? I think what you're saying on a deeper level is that when parents or caregivers use the language as the child is experiencing the emotion, they can begin to connect the feeling, the experience that they have with the word and the emotional language that is associated with it. Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that, but I want to take it one step further. A lot of these kids, when you say, oh, you must be feeling so disappointing, will be like, oh, why, you're so annoying. Like, that's so annoying. Like, you can show empathy without actually expressing the empathy, but there is a magneticism between two people, especially the closer you are, the stronger the magneticism. So if a child is feeling so frustrated, and instead of reacting to their frustration as like, stop crying or stop being so frustrated, you feel their frustration. That is an empathetic response, and the child feels that.
Yes.
I do.
Okay, but the thing is, that's good for emotional regulation or emotional management, trajectory of how a child's going to manage their emotions, because the more that they're empathized with and understood, the better they'll be able to manage these, let's say, disappointments or frustration in the future. But it doesn't, and doing that is probably crucial. That's the crucial piece. It still doesn't give them the language unless somebody says that's disappointing and that's frustrating. And by the way, just to contend with what you said for a moment, I try to avoid saying that must be, because this is a little linguistic pet peeve of mine, or semantic pet peeve. When you say to somebody that must be, the word must has a commanding connotation, and it could produce resistance. So I'd much rather say, and that's why I teach validation as that's frustrating or that's frustrating, because if you're in the moment with a person and you hear them being frustrated and you say that's frustrating, right, then you're not saying that must be as in you must be, where you could produce some resistance. You're just saying, I'm reflecting back on what you're saying, which is that it's frustrating. So a little pet peeve, semantic.
Totally. I happen to agree with you, but one of the things that, one of the social skills, the first lesson that we learn is really empathy, that we need to have empathy for ourselves first. We have to understand all of our emotions, all of our own triggers, which is something that we'll discuss, internal and external triggers. And we have to understand all of our own emotions. But the second The second most important rule of developing social skills, and for any of you want to take notes, write this down, is that we all feel differently in the same situation. We all feel differently in the same situation. So what I was experiencing in school was I was watching teachers doing this all the time. A child was crying in the hallway, crying. And then, the teacher's like, what's wrong? And they don't want to come out and say it. And then finally they say, oh, I left my lunch at home. And the teacher, who was thinking that they were being so empathetic and validating, they were like, that is so sad. And if I left my lunch at home, I would also be so sad. And the student was like,
that second part invalidates, because you're saying that you have the same experience as I do, and I feel disconnected because you don't really experience my experience.
That's actually an excellent point. I agree with that. But take it one step further. They're like, no, I'm not feeling sad. I'm feeling scared. Because my mother warned me this morning that if I leave my lunch at home, she's going to punish me, or she's not going to take me to the bagel store again. So I'm not feeling sad. I'm feeling scared. Right. The teacher was projecting their own, if I would leave my lunch at home, I'd be sad. And the teacher thought so. So what we have to make space for, and which is so important, especially when teaching children social skills, and especially when it's parents, is that just because you would feel, someone would be like, oh yeah, I called three people and they didn't want to play with me on Shabbos. So the parent is like, no, that's so hurtful. And meanwhile, the kid is like, no, that's so exciting. I didn't want to play with anyone. You wanted me to play with somebody, but I didn't. So we have to understand, and it's such an important thing. And I always say, like, if I could scream from the rooftops, we need to explain, the research has changed. It used to be that we teach social skills, and a teacher, somebody would exclude someone else, there would be a group of 3 girls and they would exclude someone else from the ball game. And what would the teacher do? The teacher would go over to them and say, like, why, you're not letting her play. And they would say, yeah, whatever. And then the teacher would follow up with this question: how would you feel if they did this to you? And this is an outdated question for this exact reason, because what do they always say? I wouldn't care. Because usually you're talking to the most popular kid in the class, they wouldn't care, because they would go on to the next, they would go on to the next thing, and they really wouldn't care. So what we need to focus is like on the last time that they felt hurt, or the last time that they felt left out. And, we have to make space for the fact that we don't teach social skills like that anymore. Like, we don't assume that children are feeling a certain way. We have to be curious about how they're feeling. And like you said, we have to give them the language. But the most important thing about giving the language is we don't give them the language while they're upset. We give them the language when at a Shabbos table, at a supper table, when we're driving in the car. How do you, let's give a definition of pride. Let's give a definition of worry. How does nervousness and anxiousness, anxiety differ? Let's have these conversations, and let's talk. I always say, let's talk about our emotions like we're talking about the weather. And the best way is for us to model it out loud, which so many of us don't do, because we weren't brought up. I think our kids are going to be brought up like that. Like they're going to do this as adults. But when we spill the rice, we don't say, we know it's frustrating, but we don't talk out loud. Oh my gosh, that is such a frustrating experience. We just go, whatever, and we clean up the rice. We could, even those of us who are emotionally mature, we still don't speak it out, so part of what I do with my course family, like I like to call them my course family, is really train them, just to speak out our reactions, to take our emotional temperature a few times a day. How am I feeling? Get into the habit of saying this, and this way, we give the children the confidence to be able to say that. Also, I'm hearing now kids say more than ever, I'm so disappointed. I'm so frustrated. Maisha, did you grow up saying like these? Maybe you did, but like most of us did not grow up saying like, I'm so hurt, I'm so worried. Like we act it, but we don't necessarily communicate it. And that's really what we're trying to teach the children of the next generation. They don't have to act out their emotions. They can just communicate it.
Amazing. Okay. Let's just take a break for a second. I just want to remind everybody, for those of you who might have questions or comments, we have a lot of non-therapists presumably on tonight. I see some names of people who I think are not mental health professionals, and that's great. Shifi, is it okay if non-professionals raise their hand and ask questions too?
I love this stuff.
Okay, great. So for everybody who has a question, please click the reactions tab on the bottom of the screen and raise your hand, and we will call on you. But before we continue, I just want to remind everyone, for those of you who don't know yet, Mondays with Maishi is now sponsored by okclarity.com. okclarity.com is the only online platform for wellness professionals who work with the Jewish community to be found online. Their innovative directory allows users to search for therapists, psychiatric medication providers, coaches, and nutritionists for free. I am proud to have my very own OK Clarity website where potential clients can find me or simply learn about what I do. As a therapist, you know how we despise marketing ourselves. Yeah, I think that's the worst thing the therapist could do. We're very poor marketers and business people. Enter OK Clarity, who does this for you in a professional and classy manner with actual results. When you are ready to invest in your online presence to increase your exposure and your client base, reach out to them to see if you qualify to join. They have high quality assurance standards and vet every single professional in their onboarding process. Also, if you have WhatsApp, OK Clarity has an amazing WhatsApp status or groups with thousands of obsessed followers. Yes, I am one of them. Their WhatsApp is a free way to improve your mental health. This is, by the way, for therapists and non-therapists. Most of the people I think who are signed on to the WhatsApp are not mental health professionals. They're just people who are interested and looking for self-growth. There's lots of great content to share, and you can share them with your clients. And they post great humor, so you'll laugh too. If you have WhatsApp, shoot them a message at 917-426-1495. Again, that's 917-426-1495. So still waiting for anyone who might have questions or comments, but Shifi.
I think you have a calling. You should go into the infomercial business.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Perfect.
You know how mental health professionals hate marketing ourselves and doing business.
I actually saw your page on OK Clarity. It looks great.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to also announce that if anybody is interested in sponsoring Mondays with Maishi, you can certainly reach out to me at mnorman@lcsw.com, and we can have a talk about sponsorship for Mondays with Maishi. Shifi, you promised to tell us the 2 secret ingredients. I'm not sure if they were covered or not, but can you please delineate them? Here's everybody's big chance to learn something great that will save your children and save all the children in the world. Tell us the 2 secret ingredients.
Well, I wish I had your infomercial voice, but I don't really have it. But I feel like now would be an opportune time for me to tell you that I also write a weekly newsletter. You can catch that on my website. And I do sell 2 courses, Social Skills Made Simple and Anxiety Made Simple, which really exciting are now about to be approved for CEUs through Core Wellness, Mr. Chopper, and it is very exciting. So we're working on that. So you'll be able to get CEUs along with
What's your website, Shifi?
Shifi Lieberman.com, SHIFI-LIEBERMAN. Thank you, Maishi, for clarifying the ad yesterday. Yep, that's how you spell it. You could sign up. There's actually now tomorrow there's a newsletter going out, and we're sending out a quiz that you can all take to see how good your child's social smarts are. That'll be tomorrow. Just by the way, we are in the middle of a summer sale. The newsletters are not usually that sales heavy, though sometimes my mother tells me that they are a little sales heavy. But for the next week, we are pushing sales, and then it will go back to regular programming of.
I'm starting to change my mind about what I said before about mental health professionals hating marketing.
I actually do hate it, but I'm very passionate about this stuff. Tomorrow, actually, the topic of the newsletter is, do therapists ever tell their clients that they're crazy? Because I did get that question. Most of my newsletters come from real questions. And someone did come over to me over Shabbos, and he said, Shifi, tell me the truth. You just sometimes want to tell the client, you're crazy. You're just crazy. And I thought it was a good question. I'm going to be answering that.
It's definitely a very effective intervention, by the way.
Yeah. So that's tomorrow's newsletter. And back to the secrets of success. Okay, so I'm going to say the secrets of success. The 2 ingredients of a healthy and functioning family. And some of you might think like that's obvious, but let me tell you, it is not obvious, because let me just explain to you some of the theories of dysfunctions include the parts of what we learned that, that the reason why families don't function well is because of lack of communication. Naj will tell you that we have invisible loyalties to our parents. We don't want to be healthier than our parents. If we're healthier than our parents, then it's some sort of betrayal. So that's something that's keeping families back from functioning. So there are many theories of dysfunction, but the ones that speak to me and I see firsthand, and I invite you all to look at the healthy families around you. Sometimes you just look at a healthy family and you get healthy vibes, you know, what do they have? And they have these two ingredients. So the first ingredient, this is a slide from my social skills made simple.
Do you have that online? Do you want to share it?
I'm so happy to share it. I could email it to you afterwards and you could email it back.
If you have it accessible on your computer and you want to share it, that would be amazing.
So I wish I did. I'm on a different computer tonight. Here, I'll do it like that. Is that at all helpful? Oh shoot.
No, that doesn't usually work.
All right, you might have to take your
That's how we did Zoom in the 60s. We held up papers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the 1960s for those of you.
Yeah. Okay, so the two ingredients of families that are functioning on the highest level are one, hierarchy, but not hierarchy in the sense of rules and regulations. Hierarchy, which means that the parents hold control in their house, the parents have the ability to control their own negative emotions. Children feel safest when parents are in control of themselves. When parents lose it, children feel insecure, and they feel, like we always like to say, like, you know, can you imagine leaning on the wall of the house and all of a sudden the wall of the house moves? That creates a real insecurity for children. Parents who lose it, parents who do not have a healthy and appropriate emotion management, that is something that will create insecure children. And on the flip side, the parents who have the ability to be able to control their emotions in a very healthy way, and typically, like I always like, there is a spectrum, which I always say here, the healthiest families are when the father and the mother can control their emotions in a healthy way. And I always get this question, they're like, yeah, right, Shifi, find me a house when the, you know, mother and the father. And I always say, don't be silly. In my house, Baruch Hashem, like, like I feel like it's something that it's a worked on process. I can't say that it's perfect because only God is perfect, but it's something that we're very much aware of. And mothers and fathers who can control their own emotions will create secure children. The second ingredient is something that is very passionate and close to my heart, and this is attachment theory. Secure attachment means that there's emotional and physical connection to their children. Parents who have a meaningful connection to each other and to their children, and an understanding how the child wants and needs to feel loved, and a belief that children are inherently good and want to please their parents, that is a secret to success. I can't begin. I sometimes parents, like they give me the information, like before they even talk, like they'll call me and they'll be like, Shifi, my child is just bad. Like and I'm like, right away, I'm like, okay, I know that they don't have one of the ingredients to success of a healthy family. So parents who love each other, parents who have appropriate emotion management, and parents who have empathy for their children, which means a real deep empathy for their child. These are the parents who have their own security and own self-confidence. I know you spoke about self-confidence with Dr. Lieberman. These are the children that are able to identify their own emotions and react appropriately. And this will create the children having the best relationships and the most appropriate social skills. Now, there is trauma, okay? Unfortunately, I don't have to tell anyone who's a therapist understands. Trauma will throw off this entire chart. I don't blame, I don't shame. I am just trying to explain to you. Sometimes parents are pulling their hair out and they're saying, Shifi, I'm doing everything right. And they are, and I believe that they are, but there was some type of traumatic experience. There was some type of traumatic experience. Hold on give me 1 second. My daughter about that. Were you talking about me?
Yeah, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about this is when you talk about parents controlling their own emotions, being in charge and in control of their own emotions, it must be very interesting. I don't know if this is something you've ever thought about, in the context. I'm sure you've thought about it, but maybe not necessarily in this context. Is disclosure? How much disclosure? We know that parents need to be the child's rock, but at the same time, children need to see parents' emotions and playing out. So how do we balance conveying our emotion or allowing our emotion to be displayed without fearing that, having the child become afraid and insecure?
Okay, so I actually love this question, and I am a very big believer in the fact that parents need to model healthy emotional management for their children. I personally had a miscarriage when one of my children, when my older children were probably 10 and 11, and it was an early miscarriage. And, they saw like I was out of it. I had to go to the hospital overnight or something like that. And I decided that I'm going to tell my kids about it, even though it was early. And I got a lot of negative feedback for that. Like, Shifi, why would you tell your kids? And I said, you know what? It's such a great learning opportunity. Like it's understanding sadness. There's nothing wrong with understanding sadness. It's understanding loss. It's understanding grief. And if I could model that for my children in a healthy way, like I think of it as like a perfect teachable moment. So I look for opportunities. Actually, I'm okay with a lot of the teachers will say to me, in school, I would never tell my students that I'm frustrated. That's like a weakness. Like that's like so like that shows that they have control over me. So that's when I always say control is not the parents having control over their child, but control having their own negative emotions. So if parents can have control over their own negative emotions, that's the ultimate hierarchy. Like that's
Meaning the reactions to their emotions. If the reactions are intense, or produce very strong or negative behaviors, that's problematic. For the parent to be somewhat in distress and share in a regulated way to the child, well, the reason I'm in distress is because this and this negative thing happened, and that makes me sad or upset or angry. And at the same time, managing the responses and the behaviors, then the child could learn, could sort of interject. That is really.
That's exactly what I said. The number one best, most effective way to teach emotion management is by modeling. So I actually look for opportunities, and even sometimes, like, my children know that packing up before we go into an airport, my husband and I, like, we just react differently, like we just have a different reactions. And that's, again, a rule number 2, everybody in the same situation feels differently. I could be more nervous, he could be less nervous, whatever it is, but we have to respect differences because we all have the exact same emotion.
So a lot of normalization, a lot of showing differences, between how people are, and being accepting, and normalizing each one. So I react this way, my spouse reacts this way, and it's okay for my child to know that I react this way because this triggers me in this way, and she reacts this way because it triggers her this way. And we're basically invoking a lot of acceptance.
Right, exactly. One of the things, another thing that I like to focus on is that there are all different intensities of the emotion. Mm-hmm. Being a 10 frustrated is very different than being a 2 frustrated. And we have to be able to understand being peeved is very different than being furious. Being tense is very different than being petrified. So one of the things that, again, we focus on here is we go through that every single emotion has different intensities. And you don't, just because something triggered you to act frustrated, it doesn't mean that you need to act a 10 frustrated. It means that you can be a 2. So in school, for the younger grades, we use our hands. For the older grades, we use a scale from 1 to 10. But sometimes we'll say to them, like, what are you? And they'll be like, I'm an 8 frustrated. And that's like, and then they get the validation for being an 8 frustrated. And sometimes they'll say, like, yeah, I'm a 2. Like, I think I can handle this. Part of what we teach is, how the emotion management piece, which we're not even getting to, but it's how to get from an 8 to a 2. We actually have to teach our kids, okay, so you are an 8, how are you going to get to a 2? So that's, that's something. And the other thing that we focus on is that we feel emotions in different parts of our bodies. Frustration we feel in our hands, and we understand, disappointment we can feel in our head. We can feel every emotion differently, and learning to be able to identify the emotions in our bodies is so major, so that when they come, we can right away be prepared to calm ourselves down. Something that we do here is
I want to hear about how we're going to calm ourselves down. If it's okay, I want to take a question from Yaakov. Go ahead, Yaakov, and then we'll go.
I really thank you for I really learned a lot. I have a question like this. The 2 secrets are basically a summary of a big picture. Like, how do you come to it?
It's a great question.
How do you get there?
It's a great question. And it really took a lot of, I was seeing a lot of families, and I was working already in Jewish family service for many years before I had to come up with my theory of dysfunction. And there, this is, hierarchy is based on Mnuchin. Emotion focused therapy is based on Sue Johnson's work. And I honestly believe that the combination of the two is really just like, like Libby Omer me, like, this is this is what my heart tells me. My heart, and my heart tells me this, and the research from I'm not 100 years old. I haven't seen 2 billion clients, but from working in a school and from working in private practice since 2012, and and before that being in Jewish Family Service, for many years, and working also in the jail system, and in other different in different places. When and just looking to your right and to your left, look at the families around you. If you look, and you can look around, and we can be in touch, Yaakov, in a few weeks, like if you agree with me. But these are the two ingredients that I honestly believe will create healthy
My
functioning.
question was, how do you achieve it? How do you achieve this?
Oh, how do you achieve it? Oh, it's my life. It's my passion. Oh, now you're talking. I'm sorry. I thought you meant, how did I choose these two? Oh, okay. This is exactly the word.
We just, we modeled apology and some social skills, right?
Correction.
Okay, correction, apology.
Right, which I teach the kids. Like, if somebody gets you wrong, re-explain them. Just say, like, no, mom, like, that wasn't, no, like, that's not exactly what I meant. I meant this, and like, and clarifying. You could have just walked away from the question and been like, okay, she's an idiot, she didn't understand my question. But in fact, you gave me a second chance, and you explained it again, and I'm happy to have that opportunity.
That's the answer.
Is that the answer?
Yeah, you just processed what happened. Okay,
I hear you. Process,
that's part of the answer.
Right. I hear you. This is my passion. How do we get there? Is really just it's increasing the empathy, it's increasing the connection, and it's really training ourselves to have such a deep level of control over our own emotions, and such a deep connection to our children. And this is what raises the children with the most confidence, because they can be hurt. They can be them. They don't have to pretend that they're somebody else. They're so confident with who they are and these are the children who have the most amount of friends, because they're able to empathize the most with their friends. Like, when they see somebody hurting, they can go over and they can say, like, oh, I recognize that. Like, that's like, your mother's in the hospital. Like, that's scary. Like, once when my grandmother's in the hospital, like, I was like really scared about that too. I could understand that. And people like people who like people. And this is part of developing social skills, is really just being able to be so real yourself that people connect to you, people attract to you, and that's how we develop. But we have to get this, or so many of these children really should be getting it from their parents. And this is my passion. We can't teach it to children today. This is what I do all day, every day.
If you've gone through trauma, then you can't really, then you're sick.
I hate that question. Trauma will throw this off. Trauma is in a different part of the brain. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but it's in the amygdala. It's different. We go into fight or flight. We get very reactive. I do discuss, not at length. I do discuss in Social Skills Made Simple, really, the traumatic brain. I just explain to people why it's so difficult, because they're living in the part of the brain that doesn't know time and space. So that's why they get so triggered. But if I have to make a new course, that will be trauma. I don't know if I can call it Trauma Made Simple, because I don't know if you could ever make trauma simple. But I think that when people have an understanding of trauma, I think that will also just increase empathy in this world.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so back to the feelings and regulating, managing. Shifi, you were showing us that page, the colorful one.
I was showing you this page. I think it's very important thematically for people to understand where in our body they feel the emotion, because I think that the more we get to know the emotion, the more we're able to get control over it. A 3-year-old hits because they feel frustration in their hand. That's like, or they kick or they bite because the frustration is right there. So the more we thematically get into contact with this feeling, the more we're able to control it. And again, that's the name of the game. But actually what I want to show is that there are 3 different zones, calming down zones. There's a 4 to 7, which is the safety zone. There's 1 to 3, which is freeze. And there's 7 to 10, which is fight or flight. Naturally, we all go up and down. We all go up and down in our daily lives. The goal is to stay here. And I find that when we visually try to explain to kids how to keep calm and, how to stay in the 4 to 7, that's that's a relief for them, because they can actually visualize, okay, how do I get back to a 4 to 7? Either I just feel so depressed and withdrawn, I'm in my bed and I need the energy to be lifted up, or I'm so emotionally reactive, I'm so disorganized, I have intrusive thinking and I'm just a mess and I'm acting angry, and really understanding anger also, so what can I do to come down to the safety zone? And this is, we go through 18 different ways to calm ourselves down. But the number one thing that I want you all to take away is every child needs to know what they're going to do to calm themselves down. Because very often I'll ask children, I'll ask this to adults, what do you do to calm yourself down? I can't begin to tell you how many the times the parents will say, I don't know. I don't know. I just eventually time goes and I calm down. So we have to teach children, we have to give them the tools to be able to go from an 8 to a 2. And when they have those tools, there really, really, really is a relief. And especially when we reinforce them for using the tools.
Wouldn't you argue that children who have very, very strong attachment and good modeling will inherently have developed emotional regulation, so that when they become triggered from something, they will be able to regulate without knowing how they do it? It just will be a process. In other words, the way I always conceptualize it, I don't know if everybody agrees with this, but this is actually a passion of mine in describing emotional regulation, is that there's really 2 parts to our emotional experience. We feel our primary feeling. So let's say circumstances have it that I become anxious over something, right? Naturally, if I'm anxious over it, or let's just talk about upset, because that's probably easier to conceptualize. If I'm upset about something, over the course of time, it will pass. It's okay for me to be upset. And the circumstances called for me to be upset, and I feel upset. And then I calm down if I have strong attachment and emotional regulation. But what really inhibits the process, or blocks the process of this regulation, is when I become ashamed that I'm upset, or I become angry or upset at myself, or I loathe myself that I'm upset. At that point, it's impossible for me to just allow the natural course of events to calm myself down, and I'm going to have to come up with some coping mechanism. So I would imagine that if I've been provided with enough empathy and validation in my development, my emotional development, then the natural process will again allow me to normalize the fact that I feel upset, and then I'll be able to calm down. So now when we teach, so this is where social skills, I had 2 big questions for tonight, that we still left unturned. One of them is, how do we actually teach the social skills in a way that children can generalize? If I give a child ideas on how to calm himself down when he's upset, but internally he doesn't have this self-acceptance, how is he actually going to be able to execute that?
So I think that we touched on it, but I'm going to touch on it again. The information needs to be taught in a calm way. We always say we anticipate the moment and we reflect on the moment. No social skills, no lesson, no anxiety management, nothing can be taught in the moment. We're in a state of fight or flight. We're in a freeze moment. Our brain has gone to a different part of the brain. It is not in the frontal cortex. There is no logic. There is no teaching being done in the moment. The way that we teach social skills and the way that we teach all this material is in the calm moment. And of course is by modeling it for them. So there is a curriculum that we follow. We go through all the primary emotions. We go through what anger is and what anger isn't. Anger is typically a secondary emotion, a reaction to a primary emotion, unless, and there are very few instances that anger is a primary emotion, but we go through that. We give them the material when they are calm. And the way that we do it is that we reinforce them. I'll say to a child, if you can come home today with 2 frustrating moments, you can get, and you can identify 2 frustrating moments, you can get a Lieberman dollar, or you can get a Norman dollar. You can do that. So that teaches
probably better off with a Lieberman dollar.
So we can teach the child to look out for these frustrating moments, to experience them, to identify them, and instead of being reactive to them, they're able to stop. And it's that minute of space, between being irrationally reactive and thinking our
But
thought process.
okay, but what will enable the process to happen when they're experiencing that rage, right? In other words, they learned it out of context, and now they feel that explosion of rage because somebody made fun of them, and they feel so badly about themselves, and they just want to chop off the other kid's head. How is having learned about it, not in the moment, going to be integrated in the moment?
Okay, great question. So let's just say, right, we agree, everybody agrees, thumbs up, we don't teach in the moment. But let's just say that the kid comes home and the kid is in a rage. And I always say, like, that moment has gone. That moment the kid is gonna have their temper tantrum, and God bless, so do mine, and that's fine. Like those moments, that they're over. Like, we just have to allow them to go. But once the child is calm, which with like you said, the child naturally does become calm, I think with secure attachment, like that's also like just how the body naturally calms himself down. We're able to identify what happened, and we're able to say, like, this is our, know yourself. What was the trigger for you? What was the trigger for you? So he says, Penny really, he embarrassed me. He told me that I'm so bad at playing ball. And he told me that I'm out when I'm not out. And everybody was saying, you're out, you're out, you're out. And I really wasn't out. And I got so embarrassed that I smacked and I kicked and I could not calm myself down because I was so mad. Right. So now we've identified a person who's a trigger, a process that's a trigger, and what happened. And we're able to break it down. So tomorrow morning we go and the next day, and we're like, and as time goes, the parent and the child discuss, like, Penny seems to be a trigger for you. Like, Penny seems to get your heart racing. What happens? What is a trigger? We teach the kids it's a body memory. So when you see Penny, your heart is going to start racing and start racing and start racing. Right? Penny is a trigger. Recess is a trigger. So how are we going to plan for recess in a way that's going to keep yourself calm? Maybe playing ball, maybe right now when you're 8 years old, playing ball is not the answer. Like, maybe you get too triggered by that it's just not for you. Maybe we can bring chess to school. We can start planning accordingly around our triggers once we're able to understand and explain and differentiate and identify our triggers, which is such a huge relief to the parent and to the child, because we're breaking it down in such bite-sized pieces that the child can now plan for tomorrow. And that's the whole point. In the moment, and sometimes in school, like, the teacher will say, "Shifi, help me in the moment." I'll say, like, very little to do in the moment. Like, it really we have to anticipate the moment, and we have to reflect on the moment. Like, we're going to anticipate that Penny is coming to our house for Shabbos, and I had no choice. His mother asked me and I couldn't say no, and this is going to be hard for you. Like, how are we going to schedule our day? How are we going to what I have done? Like, my daughter had an ear infection. Yeah, I had actually an infection on her ear lobe. And she was like super embarrassed. She didn't want to go to camp. It's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. You can reframe the interaction for her. I said to her, for every person that notices your ear, you get a Lieberman $1. So all of a sudden she got to school excited for somebody, to notice that infection. So we can reframe our triggers so that we take control over our triggers instead of our triggers controlling us. And that's the whole point of emotional regulation. Penny can't control us anymore, because if Penny is going to control us, then that kid is going to be totally out of control. I forgot if Penny was the kid or the trigger.
So can we do that with bullying? I mean, come on and tell me how many kids bullied you and put you down and hurt you, and you'll get a Lieberman $1.
So bullying, I've watched your, Mondays with MWM-Shifi, bullying is a little bit of a different animal. So bullying, abuse, trauma, no, we're not like, every time you see your abuser, you get $1. I think we need to respect the process of trauma more than that. And I think that it takes a wise parent to know the difference, between having a social skills problem and a real traumatic reaction. So no, I don't think that it goes with anything. Bullying, just like with abuse, is very often about power and control. So yeah, no, we help them, we help them. We don't just let them, get $1. But in terms of social skills difficulties, yes, we can empower the child. And that's the whole name of the game. We need to empower the child to be able to communicate, identify, calm themselves down. And we didn't even get to like the whole process of problem solving, but maybe we can do that.
Maybe we'll get to that soon or tomorrow. I want to ask you one final question, and then you can go wherever you want. But this is a really important question to me, and as somebody actually direct messaged me about this.
Okay.
Everything you said is extremely valuable, and I learned things tonight, and so did so many other people. It doesn't talk to the most challenging situation, which is the child who's struggling because of developmental issues, because their social skills are off. The parents are providing the best hierarchy and the best attachment, and the child just doesn't get it, whether we could call them autistic or social pragmatic communication disorder or quirky, right? Does this apply? I mean, obviously attachment is helpful, but does it
Yeah.
apply, or is there a whole different curriculum or form that they need to be worked and taught the social skills? And are we not talking about that?
Right. It's a great question. I actually had that question today because really what my heart of hearts wants to get up on the top of my chimney and say, like, this course is for every single child. I promise you every single child will benefit.
Will benefit.
But,
Agreed.
but I don't know. I am not an expert in autistic children, in the children who have autism. I am not an expert on the children on the spectrum. I've taken Jed Baker. I've learned a lot from him. I would say that the children who are I would say that they need a special curriculum, one that fits their needs. They're extremely literal. They're extremely black and white. They're sometimes are lacking the empathy because of something that's going, on deeper. And I have to say that I am not sure that this is typically going to work with somebody who is on the spectrum. I would like to think that we can move the needle a little bit just by showing them the empathy and the compassion.
Agreed.
But in terms of their own curriculum, I'm not an expert enough to say it. I do get this question a lot, and honestly, the diagnosis is coming out more and more and more, in different ways. I'm sure you see that also, and it's actually on my to-do list really to learn more about it and how to help those children really develop their social skills. But I have not yet.
But there's a few points to it. I think that children who are on the autistic spectrum really struggle to absorb and take in the empathy. So I could see that as a limitation. If they can't take it in, then they can't feel it, they can't notice it, they can't have it, then obviously the social skills are not going to spill over. And the other thing that I think might be interesting for you to think about is how many children with autistic diagnoses really have attachment diagnoses, such as reactive attachment disorder and things like that. And for those kids, it might actually be tremendously beneficial, because you could take a kid who's autistic and make him not autistic with proper parenting, with proper attachment, if it's not too late.
Right. I find that the hardest parent group to work with are the super black and white, the super rigid, the inflexible thinkers. Like, how could I, they've been crying all night. How could I have empathy for them if I don't agree with what they're saying? They want to go to the pizza shop, and I said no, and they're crying and crying and crying. How could I have empathy for them? Like, they know they shouldn't go to the pizza shop. Like, they can't understand that they could have empathy for something even though they don't necessarily agree with it. Like, that's actually new to them, and they
resist it a lot.
For sure, because it doesn't make sense. Like, why should I have empathy for them? I don't agree with that. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. So the reactions.
Well, rigid and inflexible people are at the helm of people who have problematic relationships.
Right.
So they are those children that are the autistic children that we're talking about in adult form. And so for their children, again, this could be OCPD kind of parents, it could be OC kind of parents, it can be just just like more rigid thinkers or spectrum parents. So of course their children are going to have a hard time. There's no model, there's no proper model. And those kids actually do need a therapist like Shifi Lieberman to be their attachment figure.
These are the children who I do think do benefit from going to therapy and just being exposed to an adult in their life that is just, can just model for them what their parents really can't. These are the parents who I have most of, happens to be, I don't know, most of the parents that come to me to take this course. I always say you have to have a level of health and interest to even come to me to even want to take this course, because the ones who are suffering with inflexible thinking and rigidity, they don't even think they have a problem. Like, they're so not even there. Most of my course members, these are the healthiest of parents, because they're the ones that they understand that there's new research out there, and why shouldn't I expose myself, and why should I help my kids?
Those who need at least seek it out most, like everything else, right?
Right. I do find that to be true. Yeah, maybe, maybe Maisha, you can develop a course for the, for the more inflexible thinkers, for the more rigid, because I go to sleep at night worried about parents who are just so black and white. And I think, and then you see the children sometimes so black and white or so resistant to the parents that they just are so defiant. And then all of a sudden they're getting these ODD diagnoses, but I'm like, they're not ODD, their parents are freaking crazy. Like,
That's right. And the parents are great. We talked about this just, was it last week or the week before when we did on alienation and parental estrangement. And, one of the points that I tried to make was so many of these angry parents who are angry about their children's estrangement, or, let's call it estrangement, are the very parents who caused it because of their inflexible, rigid, maybe semi-abusive behavior towards the child. And then they're the same ones crying foul and saying, why are people encouraging my child? Or why is my child, isn't it right? Isn't it wrong for children to be estranged from their parents? Shouldn't they have respect for their parents? It's this very same parents whose children are just so fed up and so frustrated and have felt so alienated from the parents, or so inferior to the parents, that just can't handle it anymore. So, this is
to look within. It's all about blame and shame. They have just like no ability, like it stops like right there, like it's
the lies. Right.
so
Right.
sad.
It is very sad.
That is a sad reality.
Okay. Now, you had said you wanted to talk about the next step, was it?
There is a next step. I don't think that we need to talk about it. I don't think that time allows us to talk about it. There is the next step of it, and it's like, okay, now what? Like,
Right.
what the final step of how really, teaching our children how to calm ourselves down. I will introduce to you that, again, this was very much based on second step, but I did make it clearer for our children's needs, but it's filling out, it's training us to think in terms of, how do I feel? What is the problem? What can I do? And what is the consequence? Now, a lot of parents say to me, Shifi, yeah, right. The day that my child could ever do that, like that would be amazing. And I always say, if you told them they're going to go to Disney World the next day, if they fill it out, will they fill it out? So it's a matter of motivating them enough to be able to be interested in change and be interested in something else. And I've gotten pictures after pictures from so many of the course family members that have these problem-solving sheets all over the kitchen, including the parents writing it down. Like, how do I feel? I feel nervous. I feel anxious. What was the problem? My in-laws are coming for Shabbos, and the house is, a mess. What can I do? I could yell at my kids. I could hit my kids. I could, naturally calm myself down. I could try to explain, tell myself that my parents are not judging. My in-laws are not judging me, and it's a whole new way of thinking, which is really the pinnacle and the critical part of really developing social skills. I believe that the behaviors that children have are driven by the emotions. So if we can identify the emotion, identify the problem, and then come up with solutions and and the different consequences, all of a sudden, the children can come up with their own plans, and they can come up with their own, systems of how they're going to approach social relationships, and how they're going to calm themselves down in terms of the emotion management, how they're going to relate to people. A lot of the children have been giving each other problem-solving sheets. Husband and wives have been giving it to each other, and it really is just a very clear way of communicating. And it's a very healthy way of communicating, because it almost becomes like a relief. Like, I am who I am. I feel how I am. And I can identify the problem. It's not just that, like, my world is horrible, which a lot of, the negative self-talk, we go through self-talk, that's part of the way, different ways that we calm ourselves down. So I did not give it enough. We call it name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. Once we can name the emotion, we can tame it when we feel it. And you don't understand how many videos I get from, I love the feedback, from course members of 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds are saying, feel it to heal it. Or, today I was so frustrated, because my mower didn't let me go in the pool after I hit someone, whatever it was. But once we've opened up the communication, the lines of communication, I feel like all of a sudden we have vehicles to work with. We can teach them emotion management and social skills. And that really, like I said, has been my passion over the last 20 years.
Amazing. Are there any parents on here who are not mental health professionals who want to ask a question or say a comment? We'd love to hear. Shifi would love for you to be exposed to her program. Let's take a question from Elliot Kaplan. Go ahead, Yisrael.
Yeah, hi. So, Moshe, as you know, my thing is paradoxical interventions. And my question is, would you ever teach a child how to dysregulate better?
I love it. I love it.
Because in teaching them how to dysregulate better, then they really become aware of exactly what they're doing, and then they have more control over.
I love that. I think Jay Haley calls that prescribing the symptom. Is that what he's,
Yeah, exactly. That's true, right?
I love that. I love that. Totally. Cry. Let's see how, totally hit the wall, bang the wall. right?
Well, jump around, kick your feet,
Absolutely. And I think it's very therapeutic for the children because
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
that they see the irony and the comic and the relief of all of a sudden, like, what the, like, what am I doing? And I think it's great. I love it. It's a great point.
Yeah.
I should actually do a newsletter about that. Okay. I'm going to read your stuff and I'll give you the credit. Where can I find do you have a website or something?
Yeah, paradoxpsychology.com.
And a book.
And
Oh, you wrote a
oh,
book.
by the way, so and this Thursday I'm doing a training at from 12 to 1, and my website has my Zoom
Okay.
information.
I'm going to check that out. Maishi, we are good marketers. Okay. In the end, look at us.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, that's great. I would love to see that. It's a great point. Totally the paradox.
Shifi, a good marketer is always the hallmark of a bad therapist. So you want to be
Oh, that's-
careful in straddling that line. Okay.
I see that confidence.
Any last questions or comments before we call it a night? And we may take some weeks off over the course of the summer. So now's your chance if you want to learn something about how to help your child, your student, your client, child client. Shifi's
I
here.
do want to say one thing. I know I called parents crazy. It's partially because I've been really reading so much today about crazy, because again, I'm in my preparation for my newsletter tomorrow. But I do explain in my newsletter that we all are crazy, and really, it's really about understanding our craziness and stuff like that. So you can read it tomorrow. But I wanted just to clarify what I meant when I said those parents are crazy.
Right. And we're all crazy except for me and you.
Right, exactly.
And
And I
I'm
don't know much
I'm
about
having
you,
my
right?
doubts about you now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, Shifi, thank you very much for engaging us in such an engaging way and sharing of your expertise and your material. If anybody wants to learn more, you could go to shifilieberman.com. That's SHIFI Lieberman.com. Lieberman is LIEBERMAN, shifilieberman.com. And if you spell it wrong,
Yeah, then you won't find me.
Google will correct you. I
Oh,
can assure you. They're good at that. Right? They're actually, Google's at a point now, I think, where they finish what you're going to write even before you start writing it. So I have some questions about that, but that's for a different discussion, maybe one day when we have someone from the White House on. Okay, well, good night, everybody. For those of you who want to stay on,